All right, I'll start up. Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on YouTube. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it? Especially if you love the movies.
I had a dream.
Hashem told you to dance in a tango contest?
A dancing teacher wants to tango with you.
Critics are raving about Tango Shalom. It's clever and inventive, with right chemistry on and off the dance floor.
You're a lunatic!
A funny and thoughtful family film with a warm heart and a playful spirit. From the director of My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Oh, there's my Fernando.
Tango Shalom. In select theaters now.
Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your evangelist of the imagination, and as yet still undefined, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am robcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations episode number 746. I'm very honored to do this episode of Robservations. It's a very special episode of Robservations. And one of the things, look, we're all entertainment fans. We all like Star Wars and Marvel and Star Trek and comics and music and all kinds of pop culture. But sometimes there's moments in time when pop culture meets history. And when sometimes you discover that members of your own community, the Post-Geek Singularity community, you imagination connoisseurs, that maybe one or two or who knows how many actually have a connection to history and actually have a big connection to a significant portion of history that as yet is unrevealed to most people. And those kinds of moments are what make this show so exciting for me to do. And on one hand, I discovered Amazon has released a documentary from the filmmakers that made the Ruth Bader Ginsburg documentary recently, the Emmy Award-winning and Academy Award-nominated directors, and they have a new movie that debuted on Amazon on Friday. And it was about a period of time and a person out of history that I was unaware of. And I'd like to read a few articles so I can explain exactly who this person was, and then I will reintroduce someone who's been on this channel before, our own Mikey Lito, who actually is the nephew of the person in question. And when I've ever been able to have an opportunity like this on this show, well, never. This will be the first. But I think when you hear this story, it is very extraordinary. It is very topical. And it's amazing how resonant this story is today. And first of all, I'm going to jump in and I want to read this article from Deadline. This is by Matthew Carey. It was published yesterday at 3 in the afternoon. RBG filmmakers introduce viewers to historic activist, lawyer, thinker. In My Name is Pauli Murray. Why did I not know about Pauli Murray? That is the overwhelming response to viewers of the new documentary My Name is Pauli Murray, directed by the Emmy-winning and Oscar-nominated team behind RBG, Julie Cohen and Betsy West. As West put it in a tweet Friday, some people are furious, some dumbfounded, that they weren't taught about Pauli Murray. The documentary, now streaming on Amazon Prime, corrects a historical injustice by introducing audiences to a, quote, black, queer, gender nonconforming person who broke barriers at every stage of their life. As a law student, Murray's innovative thinking laid the conceptual framework for overturning Plessy versus Ferguson, the 1896 Supreme Court decision that had validated the notion of separate but equal accommodations for blacks and whites. Quote, during most of Pauli's lifetime, it was fairly difficult and radical to be fighting for racial equality, Cohen tells Deadline. It was fairly difficult and radical to be fighting for gender equality. And Pauli was talking about not only those two individual things, but actually was talking a lot about the confluence of both, and how being discriminated against as a black person and as a woman just compounded things. Murray, who was born in 1910, actually the year my grandfather was, and passed away in 1985, was raised in the Jim Crow South of Durham, North Carolina, in a family of African American, Native American, and European heritage. As people of light complexion, they were not well accepted by the black community, but the white community spurred them, as it did all people of color. Murray displayed precocious intellectual gifts and an early penchant for rejecting orthodoxy by preferring to wear pants instead of dresses. In 1940, 15 years before Rosa Parks' courageous act in Montgomery, Alabama, Murray and a friend refused to move to the back of an interstate bus as it crossed into Virginia. They were arrested, but framed their defense as a challenge to the legality of segregation in transportation. Quote, I think each thing Pauli pushed for Pauli was expecting change to happen, notes producer and co-writer Talia Bridges McMahon. Pauli had this idea of, if I can just reasonably explain to you the errors in your thinking and give you a new way to think about it, that you will, of course, be on board with this. Through legal maneuvering by a judge and the prosecution, the bus incident did not become the defining moment that Rosa Parks' protest would be. But it wasn't the only instance where Murray was way ahead of the times. In 1943, 17 years before the Woolworth counter sit-in, Pauli and fellow students at Howard University in Washington, D.C. staged a sit-in of their own at a cafeteria that served whites only. They succeeded in integrating an entire area near the Howard campus. It was at Howard Law School that Murray wrote a paper articulating a new strategy to overturn Plessy versus Ferguson, not as others had done. Excuse me. To say that accommodations for African Americans were not maintained at an equal level of accommodations for whites, but to argue that separate but equal inherently violated the 14th Amendment. Segregation itself, Murray reasoned, sent a harmful message to African Americans that they were inferior. Other people had been beaten down by the idea of separate but equal. Okay, that's what we have to deal with here, West observes. Pauli's like, no. There is no equal when you're separate. It is an optimistic point of view about challenging something that had been accepted for decades because of a decision in the 19th century. When Pauli outlined her position, quote, my classmates laughed at me, Murray recalls in the film, but her thinking deeply influenced Thurgood Marshall, Spotswood Robinson, and other members of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund as they brought suit in Brown versus Board of Education, the 1954 Supreme Court decision that would finally dismantle segregation in public schools. Pauli just happened to see that several years before some of the greatest thinkers of the time saw it, Cohen says. It was an extraordinarily deeply thought-out idea, and it just ended up that Pauli was 100% correct. Not only that this is morally correct, but actually it's a potentially a winning strategy. Like, there's a legal argument to be made here. At Howard, Murray encountered sexism on a regular basis. Unlike many in the civil rights movement, she was simultaneously concerned with the rights for African Americans and women, and she saw discrimination against both groups as resulting from the same moral failing. She came up with the great term Jane Crow to describe it, Cohen notes, and in a number of papers, but also interviews, was often bringing up by what today's activists might be called the issue of intersectionality. This was an idea that was very much in Pauli's thinking because of Pauli's lived experience. Murray argued the 14th Amendment could also be used to attack gender-based discrimination. Courts have not yet fully realized that women's rights are part of human rights, Murray wrote in an essay titled Jane Crow and the Law, co-authored by Mary Eastwood, but the climate appears favorable to renewed judicial attacks on sex discrimination. In 1965, years before Ruth Bader Ginsburg would argue her first Supreme Court case on gender discrimination, Murray crafted the legal arguments that led to a U.S. District Court in Alabama to rule that women must be allowed to serve on juries. After so many losses and so many failures in a lifetime, Murray says in the documentary, this was my sweetest victory. Ginsburg and Murray became friends, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg credited Pauli's work as she argued sex discrimination cases before the Supreme Court that she would later join as an Associate Justice. In fact, it was Ruth Bader Ginsburg who first told the directors about Murray. Then, after RGB told us, we started looking into Pauli, West says, and were absolutely blown away by all the areas of our life that Pauli influenced. Civil rights, activism, labor rights, feminist legal theory. We thought, oh my goodness, what a life, and why didn't we know about this person? Murray lived as a non-binary person before there was such a term. Her struggles with her sexuality and gender identity at a time of great ignorance in society about such things contributed to depression that would cause her to be hospitalized on multiple occasions. She eventually found love with Irene Renee Barlow, the office manager at a law firm where Murray worked for a time. Murray was also a deeply spiritual person and made a decision that shocked Ruth Bader Ginsburg and other friends to leave the law and study to become an Episcopal priest. In the end, Pauli sees the limitations to the law, Bridget McMahon comments, and so that is why you see this turn towards spirituality that is ultimately like, actually, we need to get to the souls of people. Until we actually get everyone invested in the common idea, we're never going to achieve anything. In the last years of her life, Murray worked on a memoir as she battled pancreatic cancer. Songs in a Weary Throat was published posthumously in 1987. She saw herself above all as a writer. Among her many salient words were these: one person plus one typewriter constitutes a movement. I think that's why it's a good time to be digging back into the messages that Pauli was spreading throughout life about how we can advance things, as well as the very act of reconsidering our history with Pauli Murray in it, Cohen tells Deadline. The whole question of who we revere, whose contributions, particularly intellectual contributions, have advanced the country. I mean, Pauli Murray's just a fantastic example of someone whose history hasn't been explored enough and needs to be learned more. So that was an article that appeared in Deadline yesterday. You know, I was going to read a review of this movie, but I don't think I need to read a review of this movie because we have somebody here, one of our very own, Mikey Lito, a member of the Post-Geek Singularity community for quite some time, and a lover of To Live and Die in L.A. I'm just going to bring him straight on. Pauli Murray was, well, I'll let him tell you. Please welcome Mikey Lito to the show. Mikey, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Rob, for inviting me. Aunt Pauli was my father's sister. And I told you before we came on that I wanted to give testimony. First, I want to give testimony to my parents. Both of my parents were working parents. My father worked for the Central Railroad of New Jersey for I don't know how many years. He used to travel from Crown Heights, Brooklyn, all the way to Brown Brook, New Jersey. And if you look at that on the map, it's quite a bit of distance, and he did it with public transportation. And my mom also worked outside the home every day. So they were probably very happy to get rid of a nappy-headed Bazankus, as my mom liked to call me. And whenever Aunt Pauli said that she would take me off on little trips and what have you. So I spent a lot of time with Aunt Pauli in, I guess, what would be my late elementary school years, early high school years. And she was just an amazing woman. I was talking to a friend yesterday from Durham, North Carolina, and she was saying that she never knew about Aunt Pauli and all the different things that she did, and I told her it's kind of weird for me to experience what's going on now after these things about Aunt Pauli. I always knew. I'm surprised that other people, not so much that other people didn't know them, but other people in the family didn't know them. My cousin Karen appears in the film. Karen did the major uh, carrying jugs of water for the family in the latter years of Aunt Pauli's life. Um, she did things that other members of the family did not want to do. And so it was surprising to me to learn that Karen really didn't understand all the different things that Aunt Pauli was involved in, because I always knew Aunt Pauli was constantly on her typewriter, sending off letters to anybody and everybody who would read them. And she, I mean, she sent a letter to President Nixon volunteering to be on the Supreme Court when he was looking for somebody to be on the Supreme Court. So so she was all about human rights, and that's the way that I always looked at her. Um, she was interested not only in the plight of African Americans, but in the plight of women. Um, for as long as I've known her, she was always involved in one thing after another that was like way ahead of what other people did. Uh, Betsy West and Julie Cohen, who are the directors of this film, they have my eternal gratitude for bringing this forward to light. RM, who is one of your co-hosts and one of your moderators, she has my eternal gratitude for constantly needling me to contact you about this film. Um, Aunt Pauli is a person that needs to be known. I can, well, I don't know. It,
Well,
she's an amazing, amazing woman.
I mean, I have to ask, your experience. Obviously, you've shared a lot of your own life on this channel. We had a long conversation, and you've been very candid about your past and your own life, which is also quite extraordinary. Now, I find like this article mentions the idea of intersectionality, and I think that there's almost a misconception that a lot of the issues that we see happening today, especially in the realm of whether you're non-binary people, trans people, the LGBTQ community, that these are somehow new issues, when these have been around since humanity climbed out of the trees. This is not something, but we just haven't heard about it that much. And I just find it interesting. What I find fascinating about Pauli, I know her, but the fact that she was not, at least apparently from the cursory research I've done and since I've known this, she was not hiding herself. Like, she was out there, and she was, whether it
No,
was, is that not true?
she definitely wasn't. She definitely was not hiding herself. The only thing that I would say about her was, and there's some dispute about this between me and everybody else. I'm not convinced that she wanted publicity. I specifically asked her when she was living in Boston, and I was up for a visit, about how come you're not out. As a matter of fact, in the film, there's an interview that she did with WGBH Boston, and I think it's around that time that I'm thinking about when it's like, how come you don't do more of these interviews and what have you? And she wasn't really interested in that. She was interested in the work, in getting things done. Um, I'm fascinated by all the things that she did, and the the uh, the thing I think that's really fascinating to me is that I just have a completely different perspective about her than other people do because I understand all these different historical things that she did. But to me, she was the woman that screamed at me about me and my sister about burning green beans on the stove and how that costs money, or take the dog out for a walk around the block and what have you. So that's the type of person. There's a story that I put in the essay that really kind of magnifies this for me anyway. Uh, when she went to Ghana in 1960 and 61, she bought a Volkswagen Carmen Ghia while she was in Ghana. And when she decided to come back, at that time, Ghana drove on the, let's see, we're on the right side. They drove on the left side of the road. So all the mechanisms for the car and everything are in what we would consider the passenger side. Well, the Connecticut Turnpike had tolls like every 12 miles. And there was like 4 different toll booths between New York City and New Haven. And imagine her rolling up to a toll booth and there's either a kid, me, or a dog, or a fly swatter on the end of a yardstick sticking out the window, so to pay the toll. These are the kind of things that I grew up with while I was with her. So,
So she was your aunt.
yes,
She's not the firebrand politician or political activist. She was your aunt too. I love that. You don't burn these on the.
Yeah, she was both, because she, like I said, she was constantly writing letters. She used to. I remember, as I was graduating high school in 1971. I was somewhat of a radical myself. I was going to protest marches and different things and what have you.
Did you get that from her?
I think I got my sense of social justice from her, almost definitely, because like I said, my parents worked very hard, and they worked very hard to send me to school and get good grades, and that was an expectation of me. One of the things that Pauli did, not just with me, but with all the youngsters in the family, no matter who they belonged to, is if we sent notes and things to her and what have you, any spelling errors, any grammar errors and what have you, we would get back in a letter underlined in red pen. And I'm not the only person that tells this story. All my cousins, my brother, everybody tells the story. She was amazing, and when you were in her presence, she would correct your grammar. So, like I said, I'm just in awe of her, and I wanted everyone to know about her, because she's very, very important. One of the things, I rewatched the film this afternoon so that it would be fresh in my mind, and I know there was one fact that I picked up when I watched it the last time that I wanted to make sure that I pointed out today. In 1938, she wrote a letter to President Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, about not being publicly supportive of a federal lynching law. We are now 86 years beyond that, and we still do not have a federal anti-lynching law. It's insane.
And she was only 28 then when she wrote that letter.
Right.
Or no, she was 8. She was 18. It was 1920. Or you said 38, so she's 28.
1938, yes.
Did she ever get a response? Do you know?
She got a response from Mrs. Roosevelt. She and Mrs. Roosevelt were fast friends. That's covered in the documentary. Mrs. Roosevelt made a point of responding to many of the letters that were sent to her husband, and they became friends. They used to go talk back and forth. They used to visit with each other. Pauli actually took my immediate family and I to Hyde Park for a luncheon at Mrs. Roosevelt's home in Hyde Park, New York. So we got to meet her there. There's a picture uh, that's shown in the film that you see Aunt Pauli with Mrs. Roosevelt, and there's a blue car in that. That's my father's car that's in that picture. He's the one that took the picture of Mrs. Roosevelt and Eleanor Roosevelt. And somewhere in this house, I have a picture, or my brother and I have a picture of Mrs. Roosevelt with the rest of us, and I have to find that so that I can put it on my Instagram.
You know, yesterday there was another National Women's March protesting the draconian anti-abortion law that they recently passed in Texas. I'm curious. I mean, obviously, you have to speculate, but how do you feel that your Aunt Pauli would feel about that kind of legislation? And obviously, she was, when Roe v. Wade was passed, she was obviously still with us. And right. None of I don't think it really, I didn't read anything about abortion rights per se, but obviously as somebody who was keenly aware of women's issues from the early in her career, what do you think she would have thought of that Texas law? And would she be out, would she have been somebody that would have been marching as well?
I'm not certain whether or not she would be marching, because I'm not sure that I ever remember seeing her marching. She definitely would have been in back rooms and meetings and contacting people and sending letters. She was constantly on her typewriter. The way, let's put it this way, the way the modern generation uses phones is the way she used her typewriter. She was constantly on her typewriter sending letters to anyone and everyone. The law in Texas would not have made her happy, but then a lot of things that have happened in the last several years would not have made her very happy.
I mean, I love this quote: "One person plus one typewriter constitutes a movement." I mean, what a great quote.
It's absolutely the way that she was. I have a poem of hers that I wanted to read. And I turned the wrong page. It's called Words. We are spendthrifts with words. We squander them, toss them like pennies in the air. Arrogant words, angry words, cruel words, comradely words, shy words tiptoeing from mouth to ear. But the slowly wrought words of love and the thunderous words of heartbreak, those we hoard. She considered herself a poet first and foremost, and everything that she did beyond that grew out of that. One of the things that I learned today, well, the book of poetry that she did, Dark Testament and Other Poems, the very first poem, Dark Testament, was she was encouraged to, she had written a portion of it, and then she was encouraged to finish it by Stephen Vincent Burnett, which I really didn't know. I looked up today because all of her papers and everything is at the Schlesinger Library at Harvard University in Cambridge. And amongst her 135 boxes of papers, there's a reel of tape recorded August 20th, 1968 by a young 13-year-old named Mike Murray to the music of Quincy Jones's Gula Matari. And it's that poem, Dark Testament. And my brother and I are anxious to go to Boston to get in those 135 boxes and what have you. And you know that I'm going to be looking for that tape.
Oh, yeah.
She had a reel-to-reel recorder. She inspired me to get a reel-to-reel recorder. And she was constantly that's one of the great things. You were talking about reading a review. The film has a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. And the reason that it's 94% instead of 100% is there's a review from a reviewer at the New York Times. And that is a reviewer that did not understand that this woman did not allow herself generally to be filmed. The only filming that I know that was done was the film that mostly appears in the documentary and an interview that she did with Charles Kuralt on CBS News. And that's the only time that I ever think she appeared on camera. Everything else is audio recordings and historical records. And that's why I think that Julie and Betsy did a fantastic job with this documentary.
And someone gave a review that said was critical of the film because there wasn't enough film of her talking.
They said it was a PowerPoint presentation.
That kind of thing just really.
And the thing about it is, there's another article in the Times that was a fabulous article, but they weren't the official movie review.
Right. Yeah.
So it didn't count. So I'm actually very happy with the reception of the film. I just want as many people as possible to see the film, and I think that people need to remember we get all hung up on labels that I'm a this or I'm a that, and the only label that really counts is that you're Rob and I'm Mike, and that's really it. And
I completely agree.
What kind of person that you are and how you treat other people, and if you go on the basis of that and just let everybody do the things that they need to do, then the world would be a much better and happier place.
Well, obviously, one of the things I'm curious about, I mean, obviously with your family and coming from the South and all of that, obviously she was not traditionally gender conforming to the roles of the time. Was that something your family was aware of, and did anybody talk about that at all?
We were, as the film states, we were completely unaware of that. Now, me being a gay man, I don't have a problem with it. Oops, lost the lighting. It's sundown, Rob.
That's it. No one wants you to talk anymore, Mikey.
Just bear with me for 1 second.
Yeah, sure. No worries. Yeah, I think that's just a compelling part, especially in this day and age as well.
Yeah, we were. Hello. Oh, I see what.
Yeah, if you get close to the camera there, look, you're a little Brando-esque from Apocalypse Now, kind of at the end.
Well, now I'm blue, so there we go.
Yeah, there we go.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
No, the family was completely unaware of anything about her sexuality. In the film, they talk about the woman that they consider her partner, Irene Barlow. I did know her. I was very familiar with her. As was stated in the film, she was introduced to the family as a friend. I was unaware that they spent any intimate time together, but I was aware that they spent time together. I went to Irene Barlow's apartment, so I knew where it was. It's down in Alphabet City, in a nice area of Alphabet City. So I knew that, but consider, I don't know if it was at the same time, but Aunt Pauli lived on East 11th Street, and Irene Barlow lived on East 23rd Street, and yet still they had what essentially was a long distance relationship, which is kind of goofy. So, but other than that, no, I wasn't aware of that. I got to make sure that the electricity gets hooked up. So just bear with me for 1 second.
Yeah. But this is what I mean. It's so great to have. You just never know when members of the Post-Geek Singularity, like Mikey, I mean, We talk about movies. We talk about the MCU. I had no idea that his Aunt Pauli was such an esteemed individual. And it always comes back to the central idea of this entire YouTube channel, which is what I say every day when I jump off this show. Every person has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. Now, this documentary about her is on it's on Amazon now. As I said, it dropped on Friday, and you can go see it. And it's, the Variety review says, I was going to read it, but I'll read a little bit. It says, directors Betsy West and Julie Cohen offer a richly woven biography of a human rights champion, often ahead of her time, but so right for ours. And I mean, what's more topical than that? And I think, for the people that always are screaming about social justice, here's an individual that really put her all of her efforts where her heart was. And I think that makes this documentary incredibly timely and definitely something that is worth looking into. And I think that in this review, it says, by pointing out the gap in years between Pauli Murray's actions and landmark events, the directors make a purposeful, persuasive argument about Murray's place in the nation's civil rights history. And this is the thing that I was so taken by in hearing this story is how I had not heard of her. 15 years before Rosa Parks refused to move her seat, Murray and her good friend Adele McBean were jailed for refusing to budge on a bus in Richmond, Virginia. And this is dealt with in the film. And I think that the fact that the directors of the Ruth Bader Ginsburg documentary were introduced to Murray by Ruth Bader Ginsburg herself was amazing, and that they jumped on this story and made this film. I mean, I think that's in the best traditions of documentarians. I mean, anyone who's ever made documentaries, and admittedly, I've never made a documentary about issues. All the documentaries, I spent 20 years making documentaries about the making of movies. But one of the things that any documentarian worth their salt knows is that when you sit down to make a documentary, you have an idea of the story that you want to tell, but the story itself starts to define what it is. Like you might go in wanting to make a certain kind of a movie, but as you do your research and as you get into all of this, then it becomes something else entirely. And that's what makes documentary filmmaking so exciting from a creative standpoint, because you just never know where your subject is going to take you and what you're going to learn. And I think in the case, I don't know the two directors. I mean, Mikey does, but the fact that in talking to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, they found this story. No, you've got sound. I can hear you, but I can't see you. But we'll bring you back. Mikey's just resetting his camera. So here's an incredible documentary that I think we all of us should watch. And again, it's on Amazon now. Sends in a super chat and says, "Congratulations, Mikey Lito. My Name is Pauli Murray is long overdue and is a great film highlighting the amazing contributions of an extraordinary American." So that is great. So Mikey, we'll wait. We're not going anywhere. Another thing that this documentary says is that her personal correspondence and musings speak directly and at times painfully to the struggle for LGBTQ people and the growing understanding of gender nonconformity. From a young age, Murray was not comfortable with being female, and there were periods of her life when the questions roiled. Her Aunt Pauline, among the maternal family who raised her when her mother died, called Murray "my little boy girl." Correspondence between Murray and doctors reveals how profoundly troubled she was. But there was also a long-term romantic partnership with Irene Barlow, and the film makes delicate use of that love story. My Name is Pauli Murray is ample but never overstuffed. The interviewees include engaging academics Tina Liu, head of the Yale Residential College, and Brittany Cooper, whose classes at Rutgers reflect the diversity Murray advocated. Arguably, the sweetest interview takes place with former Brandeis students Ernst Myers and Reggie Sapp, weighing in thoughtfully and lovingly on the prickly generational tensions between their beloved professor's view of social change. She insisted on using Negro and black student activism on campus. What is it they say about the honor of prophets? Not only are they snubbed by their own place, but they are so often lost to time as well. The documentary unites Murray with a potent moment. Ours, to be sure, but also finally hers. Those are excerpts from the Lisa Kennedy penned review of this that actually dropped on February 2nd, 2021 in Variety. Mikey, I don't know if we'll get you back, but I'll leave this open, and hopefully we can get him back. Hope so. We shall see. I'll go to a letter. Undead Sick writes in and says, "Hello, Robert. Today I want to talk about comic book movies. Now, let me start by saying that I've been reading comic books my entire childhood, and I was a big fan of both Marvel and DC. Sadly, in the last couple of years, my passion and excitement has kind of shifted. And I know everyone has a so-called stiff one, pardon my French, whenever the newest MCU movie comes out. I'm not trying to shit on Kevin Feige because he works his ass off trying to give us great content, but for me personally, I have a big love-hate relationship with the MCU. To me, it has just been so hit The Winter Soldier and miss. The biggest offender to this day for me is still Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man Far From Home. Those two movies betray everything what I think and feel like Spider-Man should be. My hopes for No Way Home are a little better, but not much. I even found the movies in Phase 4 so far very mediocre. Did Black Widow really need Hydra 2.0? Shouldn't a martial arts movie, yes, even a Marvel one, be more gritty and violent? And what's with all the Jackie Chan comedy? I look forward to Eternals because I feel like it's going to be the prologue for introducing the X-Men into the MCU, as well as Doctor Strange 2, because they said it's going to be a horror-type movie. But maybe I'm just too harsh and unfair. It's just that in recent years I've become a much bigger fan of the DC movies. Maybe it's because I like my superhero stuff more dark and gritty. But if I look at Man of Steel, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Joker, the 2021 version of Suicide Squad, you know what? I'll come back to this. I got Mikey back. And I want to talk to him about this letter because we like to talk about the MCU. So welcome back, Mikey. Sorry.
Oh, thank you.
You are back. All good. So you're powered up.
You too.
Although, yep,
yes,
we're good. Now you're good. Sounds good. Looks good. You're back. So I was
sorry about that.
No, it's all good. So to continue on, actually, I'd love you to hear this letter I was reading too, because I think you'd have something to contribute, as we're both big MCU fans. So if you'd stick around after we talk about after we finish talking about your aunt, but I'm curious, did her life of activism like rub off on you? And you had mentioned that part of the reason you are the way you are now was obviously because of her incredible influence throughout your life. But did you ever want to get a typewriter yourself and become a community activist and start writing letters and put keystroke to paper?
Not until I decided to wait a minute. Not until I decided to come out as gay. I know it's wrong. I'm sorry. I'm getting feedback.
Oh.
Just bear with me.
Sure.
I take those out. Maybe I can talk straight. Not until I decided to come out as gay, which was in 1993. I was 40 years old, and at that time, I decided to get very active in what I call, I don't use the alphabet soup of
Right.
LGBTQIABCDE. I do GSD, which is gender and sexual diversity.
Oh, I like that.
That's what I use. Okay, I got that fixed now. Because that covers all the things that oh great, now the camera crashed.
Uh-oh. Well, if you want to still
No,
talk, we
no.
can still hear you.
I'm going to continue talking. So
Yeah.
yeah, so once then in 1993, I went to the March on Washington for gay and lesbian um, folks, and I participated in the march there, and then got pretty active in the GSD community for a time. I have always written letters or had things to say. That's kind of why I started my blog. Um, I don't write anything regular. I write it when I feel like I have something to say. But other than that, I certainly wasn't as active as she was and what have you. But I, I'm very much, I guess, what people would call a social justice warrior. So I'm constantly on the lookout for when I feel people are behaving badly or what have you. Most of the time, I think, I have a very big problem now with people who don't understand facts. Facts are facts, and so people that don't recognize facts, I have a lot of problem with them and what have you. And so I'm starting to get interested in writing again, and if I ever do get the channel going, that's going to be one of the shows is about language and the precise use of the English language, which I definitely got from her.
Why do you think people have problems more and more with facts these days?
It's unfortunate. People really don't want to hear other people's opinions, and the thing is, no one's really forcing you to listen to them. There happens to be an on-off switch on your computer, your television, your radio, whatever it is that you happen to be using. It would be unwise not to listen to other people's opinions. Even I watch Fox News on occasion, but you know, uh, people need to understand that not everybody does everything the same way, and things that are important to certain people are not important to other people. One of the things that Aunt Pauli and her generation fought for was the capitalization of the letter N in the word Negro. And I know currently I have a lot of problem with pronouns and how people use pronouns, especially when it comes to my aunt. Um, if I feel if my aunt fought to capitalize uh, the letter N in Negro up until almost the day that she died, I don't think she would be using non-binary pronouns to refer to herself.
Oh, I
Now,
quoted
that
this
doesn't.
article and used non-binary pronouns
I know
and
you. I I know you did, and I understand why you did it. Um, my thing is this: I don't have I don't have a problem with other people using non-binary pronouns about themselves, but people in the current time, they have a tendency to project their feelings on other people, people they idolize, people that's different, uh, people that they idolize or that they see themselves in. Fine, use non-binary pronouns for yourself. Don't assign them to others.
Right.
Uh, she she left her legacy the way that she wanted it to be, and I wrote in my essay. Uh, I have it in front of me. As the years on Pauli, as the years have passed, something on Pauli never desired while she was alive began to occur in her wake. Many have become aware of her accomplishments and her actions. As she has become more well known, those of us who treasure her memory become less able to control how others view her. People are projecting their hopes and desires upon her, choosing identifications and pronouns she never used herself. People would do well to remember that Aunt Paulie never defined herself as black, but rather as Negro. We would often have discussions about that. I remember her telling me that her generation fought hard to capitalize the N in Negro, and she wasn't willing to give up the fight so easily. And it was constant. We had a lot of discussions about things of the day and things that I was doing. Like I said, when I graduated high school, I was involved in a lot of protest and things, and she used to lecture me constantly on what she called psychic violence. That's why I read the poem about words. The way people use words in this society is very important. They can be very hurtful, and they can be very uplifting, and so it's very important for us to think about the words that we use to people, not just people outside our family, but people inside our family as well.
Well, why do you think? I mean, obviously, somebody who was so precise about language and being the writer that she was. Why do you think we now live in a society where, I think most people, if you choose to be called something, most people say, okay, that's what I'll call you. But why is there such an effort, do you think, today that the idea of using pronouns, which is actually kind of a if you're precise about language, it's the grammar is not correct. And why do you think that that's become a thing?
I was thinking about something earlier today about a lot of times people, like, you have a channel, I have a channel, and sometimes we use what's called the editorial we. And I'm going like, well, now can I use editorial pronouns like that and what have you? Because now it could possibly be misconstrued that I mean something completely different than what I actually mean.
Yeah.
So, I really don't know what to tell you. The the 20s of the 21st century is an amazing time to live. I think everyone is so confused that they really don't know what to say or what to do or what to talk about. One of the things that I love about you, and I know you didn't expect me to bring this up and what have you, I love the fact that you have a loyalty to your friendship with Brian Singer.
Mm.
I really think a whole lot of you because of that. It's very important to separate people's personalities and the things they do from their work, and whether or not they may have incidentally made a mistake or not. One act by one person does not define their entire life. They have all kinds of things that are going on in their life, and none of us have walked in their shoes, and none of us know what they're doing. And friendships are not easy to come by, and they should not be so easily discarded. And that's another thing that needs to be remembered in this time that we live in.
Oh, and I get highly criticized for it, but what's funny is I actually, I've known him for 30 years, and I think that a lot of, he can be his own worst enemy, but he's also not somebody, he does not victimize people in the way he's been portrayed as doing so. He might do it emotionally, but I know this because, I've made documentaries about the guy and followed him around for, I've been in situations, and I'll tell you something, he's done so much for so many people. And, I know what kind of a guy he is, and I would not give, but like you said, I think there's a lot of, it's like being in relationships. You don't really know what's actually going on with people unless you're in that relationship. And it's really difficult to look from the outside in, but there's also a lot of issues that people might, and not just for him, but for everybody. We live in a world where people are so quick to flip a switch and immediately think the worst, without understanding that there's a lot of nuance and things that go on. And sometimes there's just subject matter that people are uncomfortable dealing with, and they would just rather not want to have to confront it at all. And I think that I know that Brian's actually a very loyal, good guy. And look, I've told people, if somebody found me in a hotel room with dead bodies and I was holding a bloody butcher knife, the one person that I could probably call up and have him bail me out of jail would be Brian. Now, as I've joked, he'd want to know if I did it. He'd get me out of jail, be driving home. He'd be like, "So, did you do it?" Like, he'd want to know. But he would know that I didn't do it, and he would know that there must be some interesting story there, and I think that's hard to it's hard to come by in this world.
And Dr. Martin Luther King used to talk about the content of one's character, and the content of one's character is not one incident; it's an entire lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that I think people need to think more about. The past two Midnight Metals, you've been talking about horror. And I was having a discussion with RM, and I said to her that, to me, life itself is a horror show. See, I was a former IT person in a former life. So IT people have a tendency to think in terms of ones and zeros, yeses and nos, decisions. And life is nothing but a series of decisions. And some horrible things can happen based on just one decision that you make. And if you start to think about all the decisions that you make in a single 24-hour day, you could possibly go out of your mind. So if you want a horror show, think about what you did yesterday. Think about what you're planning to do tomorrow. Should you really be doing that? Maybe you should do this other thing instead. Go ahead, drive yourself crazy thinking about the decisions that you have to make. That's horror. That's true horror.
Oh no, it's absolutely true, and you can see the results of one wrong step can have lasting consequences. I mean, like you said, I've always said that the human history is one big charnel house. That's just it's no one's better than at visiting horror upon humanity than other human beings are, and right. I think you're right. But on the flip side to that is life can be pretty miraculous. And if you think about the infinitude of the universe and the time we actually get to spend here, I think
don't want to go.
Yeah,
I'm 68 and I don't want to go anywhere.
I know you want to. I want to stick around if nothing else. Well, but let me just bring it back just to sort of finish off the idea. Now, for you to have a family member and your family legacy now preserved in a documentary that presumably, and now there's probably never been a better time in history where documentaries are being just devoured by people because of our streaming services. Before, right, it was really hard to see documentaries, and you had to really seek them out. 20 years ago, it was tough. But now, because of the content, not only are people finding documentaries, but they're devouring them. and I think
I was actually very surprised. I called around to a couple of people because I'm interested in this film. So when I pulled up Amazon, it was the first thing on the billboard, and I'm going like, is that because they know that I'm interested in the film? So I started making phone calls. Where's it showing up on the billboard? Where it showed up? Uh, it's Amazon's doing a fabulous job putting it out front. So I'm very happy about that. So the film is very easy to find, and you know, people need to watch, and not so much. Well, they need to think about what she has done, but we also need to think about what we are doing. In another conversation that I had with RM, uh, I also talked about the American Red Cross and a group called Team Rubicon. Team Rubicon is a group of first responders and ex-military that respond to different disastrous events around the globe in this hemisphere and what have you. I'm fairly certain that many Team Rubicon members have political views that are different than mine. And yet they are the first people that I will. Well, you know what? Rob's not going to get a super chat today. I'm sending this money to Team Rubicon and what have you because they respond to hurricanes in Texas, earthquakes in uh, Haiti, what have you. We need to be a little bit more present in our thinking and in our decisions about what we do and how we respond to the world. When Bernie Sanders was running around talking about climate change and uh, how things were going on with the planet, nobody believed it until this past summer when things were happening all around the globe. And uh, now everybody believes in climate change. And, essentially it's too late. But, we'll do what we can do. But we need to be a little bit more present in our thinking. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, and that's unfortunate, but that's just the way that it is.
well, it was like last night. I was making the comment about I was talking about how would you leave your kitchen 10% dirty? Like, would you leave however big your kitchen is, would you leave 10% of it full of dirty, festering dishes and rotting food or whatever? And I think the answer.
The dust mites conversation.
Yeah, we had that. Yeah, that too. And it's and yet we live in a place where people, they look at outside as a place where that's okay. Like, you can pollute and leave things in there, and it doesn't matter. And all of these chickens will come home to roost. We live in a closed system, so nothing goes away.
There's an excellent documentary. It's actually not a documentary. It's a new program, The Problem with Jon Stewart. And he had an episode. He's talking about burn. Well, basically, it's where the military piles all their garbage and everything into a hole, and then they pour jet fuel on it, and then they burn it. And then military members come home, and then they can't get medical from the Veterans Administration, and still we all say, we value your service, thank you for your service, blah blah blah. We need to think about the things that we say versus the things that we do, and try and be a little bit more consistent, because I'm pretty sure we want the military to have good health care and what have you, but we're not doing what we need to do to make sure that it gets done. And that's the kind of letters that we need to. We don't have typewriters anymore, but we do have email, and we can make phone calls.
I agree with you. So to wrap up about, because I don't want to jump into this other thing. Since you're here, I want to ask you about this letter.
Okay.
What do you think? I mean, as a summation, what would you want people to take away about your aunt that isn't in the documentary? Something that maybe only you could convey to them.
Perhaps look into your own families and see what they are doing. Maybe there's someone in your family that you think is not doing something that actually is doing something for the public good, and we ourselves can do things for the public good. I as far as my aunt Pauli is concerned, I would just like to see her get the recognition that she deserves. I wanted to see that happen when she was alive, and I certainly would like to see that happen now. Um, she was a great lady, and aside from the fact that she used to chastise my sister and I about burnt green beans and whatnot, I had a lot of fun with her, and she took me on adventures that a young black boy from Crown Heights would not have gone on if I wasn't with her before, which is why I wrote the essay so that people can see some of the things that I'm talking about. She was a great lady, and I respect her and my parents very much. I love them very much, and I'm glad to have known her.
For those who want to read that essay, it is both at the top of today's live chat and it's also in the description of this episode. So you can link and read Mike Alito's
and
article.
I write much better than I talk.
Now, if you want to, could I have you stick around while we read this letter? Because it's about the MCU.
Sure, absolutely.
We were talking about that before we went on. I'm just going to read what I already read because I don't think you heard it. This comes from our friend Undead Sick. Undead Sick writes, "Hello, Robert. Today I want to talk about comic book movies. Now, let me start by saying that I've been reading comic books my entire childhood, and I was a big fan of both Marvel and DC. Sadly, in the last couple of years, my passion and excitement has kind of shifted, and I know everyone has a so-called stiff one, pardon my French, whenever the newest MCU movie comes out. I'm not trying to shit on Kevin Feige because he works his ass off trying to give us great content, but for me personally, I have a big love-hate relationship with the MCU. To me, it's just been so hit, The Winter Soldier, and miss. The biggest offender for this day for me is still Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man Far From Home. Those two movies betray everything what I think and feel like Spider-Man should be. My hopes for No Way Home are a little better, but not much. I even found the movies in Phase 4 so far to be very mediocre. Did Black Widow really need Hydra 2.0? Should a martial arts movie, yes, even a Marvel one, be more gritty and violent? And what's with all the Jackie Chan comedy? I look forward to the Eternals because I feel like it's going to be the prologue for introducing the X-Men into the MCU, as well as Doctor Strange 2 because they said it's going to have a horror-type element. But maybe I'm just harsh and unfair. It's just that in recent years I've become a much bigger fan of the DC movies. Maybe it's because I like my superhero stuff more dark and gritty. But if I look at Man of Steel, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Joker, the 2021 version of the Suicide Squad, Zack Snyder's Justice League, and yes, even Batman v Superman, I loved all that stuff. And I don't think I even have to mention Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. Also, for me personally, I'm more hyped for what DC has upcoming. I think the Batman's going to be a blast. I'm very excited for Black Adam since it's going to feature the Justice Society and Intergang. I can already see a live-action version of Bruno Mannheim holding the crime Bible, which is what I hope for. Then we have The Flash, which features Michael freaking Keaton in his return as Batman, along with the introduction of Supergirl. I also hold out high hopes for Jeremy Irons to make one more appearance as Alfred Pennyworth, since it's going to be the last time Ben Affleck plays Batman. Then on top of that, we get a Batgirl movie, and here's praying for J.K. Simmons as Commissioner Gordon, a Blue Beetle movie, and a Supergirl movie. The last one I hope is going to feature Supergirl crashing into Gotham like at the start of Batman Superman Apocalypse, and that Batman and Bruce Wayne finds her and becomes kind of her mentor. And if they put Michael Keaton as Batman in that movie once again, well, that's going to give me a so-called stiff one, laugh out loud. So in closing on this long letter, at the end of the day, I'm just more excited and hyped for DC movies instead of the Marvel stuff. What is your opinion about my feelings toward this? Do you think I'm arrogant or unfair? Can you understand my reservations? I'll be looking forward to whatever feedback you're going to give me. Keep up the great work, and greetings from Holland. Undead Sick. What do you think, Mike Alito? What do you think about what Undead Sick has to say?
Dear Undead Sick, get over yourself. I don't have a super problem with what he's saying, but here's the thing: we don't have any control over what any of these creators are doing. We don't have any more control over the comic book movies than Rob does over how Star Trek happens.
Damn it.
These guys, they're going to do what they want to do. Now, as far as Spider-Man is concerned, this actually dovetails with a conversation that I had last night. I have two words for you: Avi Arad. I don't know. I don't know what kind of competition, if any, is going on between Avi Arad and Kevin Feige. All I do know is that Sony has put Avi Arad in a position that he has some creative control out over how the Spider-Man movies work. I'm pretty sure that if Kevin Feige had complete creative control over it, things would be somewhat different. But he doesn't. So if we want Sony and Marvel to continue to work together, this is the kind of stuff that we're going to have to put up with. As far as the rest of the MCU is concerned, I think people are under a little bit of a misconception. The MCU has never been like the comic books, ever. It is completely separate, if you want to call it multiverse inside or a universe inside the multiverse. It is a completely separate thing. It has similarities to the comic book universe, but it is not the comic universe. I actually separate the Marvel Cinematic Universe into the cinematic universe and the television universe, because Kevin Feige has already disowned almost anything that Marvel Television has done, although I do think that he cannot disown the Agent Carter television series, because his name and Victoria Alonso and Louis Esposito's name is completely all over that series. So I consider that series part of the cinematic universe, but the rest of the television universe, he doesn't want to have anything to do with it, and he doesn't have to. And since he's the chief creative officer of Marvel, he's the one that has the control. So, like I said earlier, get over it. I did have one other thought, but the DC. I haven't been with DC since they haven't produced Man of Steel 2.
Right.
And now I don't want them to produce Man of Steel 2. I could care less about the uproar about, oh, Superman killed Zod. What was Superman supposed to do to Zod?
Right. That's what I've always said.
He was supposed to let Zod cut that family in half and what have you, and then what was he going to do? Let the creators be the creators. If you don't like what they're doing, you had a young man that was on last night that drew his own comic book, correct?
Yep, that's right.
Do what he did. Create your own IP. You don't have to do Marvel's IP, and you don't have to do DC's IP. Create your own IP. If you can do that, be my guest. Otherwise, shut up.
I mean, that's always been sort of my advice, to make your own thing, and also, a thing that I find difficult is that, look, I rail against Star Trek, but I've had Star Trek for 50 years in my life.
Right.
For the most part, Star Trek's been very, very good to me. And
when all the Jeopardy stuff was going on, I had a slide for you, and I don't think I have it.
But yeah, I just think that I can give it up. I don't. I just think that like we've talked about, I think that bad storytelling is known as the Viceroy of Verisimilitude. His rants about bad robots and secret hideouts are legendary. Oh, you got to send me that. Send me that. I'll put that on the beginning of every show. That's very funny. But I do think that hey, you're back. Can I put you back in the show?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. because I have a picture of you up.
I had no idea that the camera was even off until I decided to throw that slide up. I tell you, I've been wanting to do this conversation with you for the longest, and the audience doesn't know that I came on early to make sure the camera and the mic were working fine. What I didn't know was that I had kicked out the plug to the laptop, so it ran out of battery power, and that's when I lost power. So
these are the things that happen.
This is what happens in the IT business, where everything goes right while you're doing the programming, and then when it comes time to do the demo, nothing works. So
I've been there here, all this technology. But yeah, I mean, I just think that I do think that bad storytelling is detrimental, and in a way, because whether you're just telling stories to make money, I think that the great stories are also the stories that sell eventually. And I think, like I'm always saying, never put your agenda before your characters and your story. And people know that, and I think part of the problem with a lot of our great franchises is that the people that created them have long stopped being a part of those franchises, and the impetus behind making them in the first place has been lost, and they've just become another part of a portfolio of a company's assets that they want to exploit. And they think about, like, Star Wars is Star Wars not because it's called Star Wars, but because of the stories that Star Wars encompassed, at least when it first started. And people think now when on a spreadsheet, you can't quantify, well, what is a good Star Wars or bad Star Wars? A company just knows, well, we have Star Wars. We just have to tell more Star Wars stories because that's what their spreadsheet says. And I think people are it boggles their mind, or they're baffled at the corporate level. Like, wait a minute, why did Force Awakens make $2 billion and Rise of Skywalker only make $1 billion? Now, I would think from a business perspective, the question has to be asked, well, why is that the case? Why did the third Star Wars movie make half of what our first Star Wars movie made? It's part of the same saga, the same characters, the same, presumably, stories are being told, and yet a company isn't asking themselves that question. And I would think, well, listen, buddy, why aren't all three of your Skywalker saga movies making $2 billion each? Any other business would be like, well, our income dropped 50% when we're doing this. Why is that? But I don't.
Well, first of all, let's tell the truth. When we were coming up, most people, not all people, I think you liked both, but most people, you were either a Star Trek fan or a Star Wars fan.
Yeah, I like both.
You were not both. Now, I happen to be a Star Trek fan. The thing that got me interested in Star Wars was Rogue One. I thought Rogue One was fabulous. And once I watched Rogue One, I said, yeah, you know what? Let me watch the rest of these movies, what have you. And Rogue One dovetailed into Star Wars A New Hope, and on and on and on. And I think I did probably go back and watch the prequel trilogy before I watched the new trilogy. The only movie out of the new trilogy that I liked was The Last Jedi. And that was basically because, being the contrarian that I am, I liked the story development of Luke, whereas most people did not like the story development of Luke.
Yeah, no, I can totally understand that. But to me, it's an interesting thing, because I would think, like, if I owned a franchise, I would go and audition people I'd be like, okay, Hollywood directors, who out there wants to make a Star Wars movie? And make your pitch. Come to us and pitch us. Tell us, what Star Wars movie do you want to make? And when they were making Force Awakens, they decided to go after somebody. They go after a filmmaker, and every filmmaker, pretty much, especially a populist filmmaker, is going to be like, sure, I want to work on a Star Wars movie. Why not? You get a J.J. Abrams. Was he qualified to do so? Well, he made Star Trek movies, so he must be qualified to make Star Wars movies, but the people don't know what makes a good Star Trek movie anyway. So
right.
I think what's happening now is that no other business would hire creatives the way Hollywood does. It's a very odd way to do it, because the actual stories that people are telling are not taken into consideration as much as the money that they've made. So it's like generically, if someone's movie made $200 million, if you've made an action movie that makes $200 million, somebody's like, well, we can hire them to do our rom-com. Maybe, because I'd rather have a director that made $200 million than somebody that made another rom-com that only made $75 million. And it's bizarre. It's a bizarre way to do business. And I think a lot of our franchises, and I don't think the Marvel Cinematic Universe is one of them. I think the great thing about the Marvel Cinematic Universe is that you have somebody like Kevin Feige at the top who's making bold moves. You know, Chloe Zhao pitched them. She had a vision for Eternals, and Feige looked at her work, and he hadn't seen Nomadland yet because it wasn't done. And he said, you know what, lady, I'm going with you. I'm going with my gut. He's like the producers of yore, you know, whether it's David O. Selznick or Louis B. Mayer running a studio. These guys would go from their gut and hire people that they banked on themselves. And Kevin Feige,
isn't it amazing how much big name talent wants to work for him?
Because he appreciates talent. You know, and what's really interesting is what's great about, to me, in Marvel is that there's a synergy between the filmmakers. I mean, look, James Gunn unmistakably brought his imprimatur to Guardians of the Galaxy and the Suicide Squad. It's very much James Gunn's movie, but he's still working with Marvel when he's doing Guardians. It's a synergistic relationship, and you have to satisfy both yourself creatively and what the studio needs. And that's a skill too, and that's everyone going in is knowing that they're working under those auspices, so if they want to do it, they can. And the people that know, whether it's the Russo brothers, whether it's James Gunn, take your pick, if it works well, there's a great fruitful relationship. And I think that looking at the Russo brothers working on their own, they made the movie with Tom Holland, Cherry. What they didn't have was the team at Marvel that can help them along. And right. I think that synergistic relationship has proven to be fruitful. Taika Waititi now, and if people, and I would think it would be a great way to work, to have a great partnership in Marvel.
I think what I've read that he has, or I should say that the Marvel team has basically told creators, we need this, and this to happen at the end, and otherwise have a good time.
Right. Yeah.
And so far, I guess we're up to 25 feature films now. It's worked pretty well.
Pretty well. I mean, even the ups and downs, you go back and you watch, like people talk about, we were talking about this yesterday, how Iron Man 2 sucks. Not really. I mean, you go back and watch it again now, it's pretty entertaining. It might not be exact.
It's a little bit better on a rewatch. I remember what I wanted to say about the MCU that I had forgotten before. The MCU television shows, and I'm talking about WandaVision, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Loki. Those are, to me, more intimate shows.
Right.
They're being developed in order to give what people would consider secondary or supporting characters and what have you, to give you a little bit more insight into those characters, and they're really developing the characters, not so much going for like the wham bang action type thing. There's action in the series, but it's really more character development. And I think that there's a lot of the fans that haven't realized that that's what's going on.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. Well, listen, sir, on that note, I would like to return you to your Sunday afternoon, already in progress, I guess Sunday evening for you. I want to thank you.
Thank you. Oh. Thank you very much for the invitation. If either of the directors, Betsy West or Julie Cohen, are watching, thank you very much, along with Talia Bridges McMahon for coming out with this film. To my good friend who I've actually met in person, RM, thank you very much for constantly needling me, as I said at the beginning of the show. And Rob, thank you very much for the invitation. I do appreciate it. Everybody, please watch the film and just take out of it what you can take out of it. And I hope that you will take out of it a lot of what I do. So.
Well, I just think it's really special for your family and for you and for everybody to have this film out into the world. And who knows how many people are going to discover your aunt for the first time, and what effect.
I've gotten a lot of reaction on social media. It even surprised me because all I basically done is saying like, "Here's the film, watch it," and I've gotten a lot of feedback on it.
Well, it's interesting because in this day and age, you never know who's going to be inspired to grab their own typewriter or their own keyboard and start pounding away those letters like your aunt did, and what kind of an example that she set for people that are going to discover her for the first time through this movie. I mean, it's so funny. After RBG came out, she became people were talking about her all over the place, and the power of that is tremendous.
I promised myself they have absolutely no idea that I'm doing it. Betsy and Julie have another film that they're working on. It's on Julia Child. It's called Julia.
I saw the trailer for that. I saw the trailer for that in front of Tango Shalom. It looks incredible.
Tango. There was a couple of theaters where Tango Shalom and My Name is Pauli Murray played on the same bill. I was actually kind of surprised.
Wow. That's amazing. That Julia Child movie looks incredible.
They are a fantastic team and what have you, and I wish them all the success.
You know, what's interesting is the fact that they're focusing on strong female characters. I mean, I like that. I mean, that's to me, that's the kind of real activism, the kind of you want to talk about social justice, putting these people out there and giving us insight into these people that are no longer with us, or people that history has forgotten. I mean, this is the kind of work that needs to be done because, you're a documentary could last. It'll be influencing people for the next 5 decades, 10 decades. Who knows?
Right.
It's amazing work.
Exactly.
Well, Mikey, thank you so much for being here, and we will talk again. I still am going to send you that To Live and Die in L.A. Blu-ray, which is sitting right back here. I have not forgotten. Don't think I've forgotten.
Did you know that To Live and Die in L.A. is coming out on 4K Blu-ray from Kino Lorber? I found that out from Tom Jr. Jackson.
Tom Jr. Jackson, it's funny because he keeps reminding me of that, and I keep forgetting that it's going to happen. So maybe I shouldn't send you this Blu-ray. We should all just buy the 4K because, man, I can't wait to get that.
Yeah, exactly. I'm on Blu-ray.com going like, when's it coming out? When's it coming out?
Yeah, when's it? I mean, that's something I can't wait to get. And by the way, Kino Lorber, they do a great job with their 4Ks. Their Hannibal 4K is terrific. The Mad Max 4K they put out is great. So I don't know where they're getting their money, but to do these things, but they're doing a great job.
Sales.
Yeah, they're having. That's right. They're having sales. They're having sales.
We're hungry for this stuff.
I know.
Take care, Rob.
All right, sir. I will see you later.
All right.
Well, I want to thank Mike Alito for being here. What a great guest he has been. Again, you know what? That's what the Post-Geek Singularity is all about. Finding new, interesting, cool, unique people and becoming friends with them and being able to find out stories. And what a great story this is. And, so I'm glad he was able to come on. I want to thank him for his time. I very much appreciate that. It's great. So thanks for coming on, Mikey. Glenn Mark. Glenn Mark sent me a verbal letter. This would be the first verbal letter I've got to figure out a way to download this and set it. I'll figure that out and I'll play it tomorrow on the show. That's cool. I've never got a verbal letter before, which is exciting. So, hey, who else is here? What else is going on? Our friend Jeremiah Bailey has there's a lot of this is an annotated. Wow, this is a letter I can't read. I gotta post. I'm gonna post this on the Facebook page. This is pretty good. Let's see. Jeffrey Lindenblatt writes. Jeffrey Lindenblatt sends me he sent me a picture of the Malvern Cinemas that is actually playing Tango Shalom. I love it. This is awesome. I want to thank you. That's all he sent. Jeffrey Lindenblatt sent me this picture, and what a nice guy. Thank you for sending this to me. Let me show it to everyone in the chat here. Here is actually, let me make it a little bigger. Here's Tango Shalom. And it is at the Malvern Cinema. I believe it's still playing there right now. I love seeing this because it's fun. Blue Bayou, which actually looks like a great film. Cry Macho and Tango Shalom. Dear Evan Hansen. And I can't tell what the other one is, but that's pretty fantastic. So thanks for sending that in to me. Richard K. sends in a super chat and says, could we get a sequel to the movie Tango and Cash? I actually worked on Tango and Cash. My first day when I worked at Warner Brothers back in 1989, one of my first tasks was to go to the Tango and Cash production office where I met Larry Franco, the producer who worked with John Carpenter. And that was something that I got to talk to him about. And that was pretty exciting. Well, listen, everyone. I think, you know what? I think I'm just going to leave it there. I think I'm going to bring an end to Robservations episode number 746. I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank my moderating staff, Justin Toner, Louise X. Sparrow. I know she was here. Thank you all for being here. And Lord Toth. I don't know who else is here, but I want to thank you. Justin Jorgensen was here. Thank you, Justin. And all of the Blue Wrenches, thank you for what you do. I want to thank everybody who sends me in letters to the Post-Geek Singularity. If you want to send me a letter to the show or any of our shows, Midnight Metal, Fully Articulated, all you have to do is go to the website at theburnetwork.net and send me a letter. It is free of charge. And on that note, I would say to everyone, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. And I would remind everyone to go to Amazon and go and see this wonderful film. We can find it. You can find it. You can look it up. And, of course, the Mikey Lito's aunt, which is amazing. And she was known as Anna Pauline Murray when she was growing up. But Pauli Murray, and the film is on Amazon right now. And check it out. And I'd love to hear what you think of it. Send me a review, and we'll talk about it on the show. And on that note, everyone, remember, as always, have a better day.